Hi, everyone. So we'll be going over exploring the influence of cultural discourse on mental health stigma, discussion, and summary. My name is Emily Martinez. I am of Filipino descent. And in my culture, um, mental health, any mental health issues are usually seen as shameful and embarrassing. Like we are, the people that I do know that have any mental health issues, like they try to hide it or they just push it aside. Um, and if there is any mental health issues that someone does have, the main thing is to just pray for them.
Hi, my name is Jingshen Dong, and I'm Chinese. So I grew up in China, and usually it's pretty similar. There's a stigma about mental health, and as like for example, when I try to pursue a major in psychology during college time, and then my father doesn't agree because he believes those are for crazy people, and then I will eventually become crazy one day.
Hi, my name is Chrisia Diaz, and I'm of Latinx origin, first gen here. And so for my family is similar. In our culture, mental health or therapy is seen for crazy people. I think there's also a big stigma around the male role and the toxic masculinity that exists, where men are supposed to be strong, men don't cry, men don't have emotions, and that kind of translates also how children are raised, and so it just doesn't get talked about.
Hi, my name is Natalia Castañeda. I'm also of Latinx origin and also first gen. Same thing in my family and in my culture. It's just very uh, stigmatized, and mental illness and mental health in general just isn't a topic that's talked about or even acknowledged that it exists. And um, it gets really just pushed under the rug as far as if anyone ever has any mental illness or anything like that.
So for me, there weren't any resources about mental health that I knew of. I didn't really know about really psychology-ish stuff, like psychology stuff until high school. But growing up, there really was nothing other than going to church and praying for the best. Um, I wish that there was more awareness when I was younger. Growing up, I later learned that my mom had postpartum depression, and I wish I had known that, during that time.
For me, as I grew up, not until my young adult period that I got introduced to reading more about the psychology articles to have more self-awareness. And I heard friends just they may go to see MFT or therapists about mild depression, but I personally never take advantage of the resources until now because we can use it towards our professional development hours.
For me, I was aware of mental health resources or therapy because I unfortunately had to deal with some trauma in childhood. And so I did seek therapy to kind of process all of that. So for me, in a way, I was fortunate to have that privilege of knowing about MFT and therapy in general. But I think that it's something that it's definitely not discussed in the culture. So even if you did want to reach out for services, you can't find that out information because it's not anywhere around in the culture. So if you wanted to see a therapist, one wouldn't know where to even begin or start.
For me, really similar. I didn't really know too much about resources for mental health. I knew it existed, but I think that was more just because of like media and like TV. But even then, it was still kind of in a bad way. It was really stigmatized, and if you did get mental health, any mental health services, it was more like because you were special, but like in a bad way, and you're seen kind of as crazy, and that's kind of how my family treated it. So if anybody in my family like wanted to seek services, they were looked at like if there was something wrong with them. So yeah, I didn't really get to see many services until I was in college, and then I was able to get my own mental health services then, and then learn more about it there.
Um, so mental health stigma contributes to cross-cultural barriers to care in many ways. Like, we all have similar stigmas on the mental health from our cultures, and I feel like with people coming, like being in America and getting care, it's sort of like a lot of people of color have mistrust in that system, mainly because it's such a white dominant type of field. And just even trying to like the stigma of like shame and stuff, especially in our cultures, where for Filipino, I don't know, maybe for you guys too, maybe for us, Filipinos are pretty prideful. And so that stigma can really affect someone trying to go out and get the appropriate care or be understood in that Filipino Asian lens, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
I think for the mental health stigma, sometimes because if we acknowledge and observe people are like making a big deal or thinking it's so weird or strange, and it's even like preventing those people from getting care, and also people if from like stigma is not that strong, it may be having hard time to deal with people from like a stronger stigma cultural background, and it's hard for them to be sensitive to each other and also provide them more like care to let them know it's just like mental health illness is just a part of your story, but it's not your identity.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's really important to normalize that mental health is just the same, if not more important, as the other aspects of health, right? Like physical health, preventative health. I think all of us that, do work at Kaiser, we all know about preventative care, right? And how much they push for that. And so I think that if we normalize that mental health care is part, right? Like if we did like annual checkups, for example, right? Kind of had like the conversations of how important it is to have mental health care. I think that would help to cross those cultural barriers, right? Because it would just kind of be a standard for everybody. So when you have your yearly checkup, you make your yearly appointment with your therapist or your yearly med check if you have a diagnosis, right? So I think that's really important, and that would help because then it would be across all of healthcare, not just particularly for certain cultures.
Yeah, I agree. I actually love that idea of like making it
Me too.
like making it part of just regular healthcare and not just like isolating it and everything. I know for me, um, definitely the stigma contributed so much to just creating barriers for at least for my family and a lot of people that I know in the Latino culture from getting help. And also, kind of like what Amelia mentioned, how like it's a very white dominated field. So I know, at least for my family, a big part of the reason that a lot of them even wouldn't have felt comfortable going to therapy in the first place was because they were probably going to get a white therapist. And like that for them, it's like that, that's a feeling of like, oh, that person can't relate to me. That person doesn't understand what I go through or like the struggles that I face as a Latino. So I definitely feel like it does create a lot of barriers in that way as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think you have to kind of have somebody that looks like you, even just the language, right? With a language barrier, there are some words or phrases or cultural slangs that you can't translate to English, right? Because it doesn't mean the
Yep.
same.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that my exposure to the mental health stigma influences my ability to prioritize self-care by pretty much like trying to like in our roles as student therapists, like just trying to understand where the stigma comes from just makes me feel a little bit better and just try to make sure that I put those thoughts like sort of to the side and just sort of not delve into those stigmas because we know that it's not true, right? And can just continuously just trying to tell us like the stigma is there, but it's with more self-awareness and more research and knowledge on our end. Like we know that these aren't true, and then we have to take care of ourselves and not worry about it so much. Like I remember when I went into psychology, like, and I would get stressed out and like thinking like, oh my God, like, am I gonna end up being like depressed from this? Or working at a mental health, like an inpatient mental health institution, like I would always be scared, like what if I ever get crazy like this? But that's not the case. Like after more exposure, like to not make yourself freak out about that, like is really important because the stigmas aren't true. And I plan to prioritize self-care once I start seeing clients. I'm sure in the beginning years of being a therapist, as we get like our feet wet in the area, it's going to be really stressful. So I think for myself is actually scheduling self-care time for me because I know in my own ways, I will delve deep into work and I will burn out. So I think if I were to be able to put it on my handy dandy planner, then I'll be able to follow that. So that's my plan.
I think for me, my own exposure to the stigma, I can now acknowledge more that when my relatives, Chinese aunties is telling me that, oh, you're just being too sensitive or you're just thinking too much. I just feel those are kind of telling me that, oh, I shouldn't be the way I am. I think now I have a better awareness about this stigma existing and people are just ignoring it. I can see that it takes courage to acknowledge facing the stigma and then to accept oh, we're just who we are and we may have some difficulties, but we're willing to take self-care, to seek for therapy and also counsel. I think it just give me more courage, or I can accept myself to seek for self-care through talking to therapists. And once I starting to see clients, I would like to prioritize my self-care, maybe through just having a mentor that I can constantly talking to my mentor about what stress me out, maybe from seeing clients, how I can better take care of clients' burden and just release the burden off my shoulder. So yeah, I think it just required the deep acceptance that we just know that it's just nothing to be ashamed of, but we can just feel comfortable to find a trustworthy counsel that we can receive the help and self-care constantly.
Yeah, that's really important. I think for me, I think about this often because I started this journey of prioritizing my self-care, right? Because we're so busy with work and school and family and kids and all these responsibilities. And I think another thing was that it was just not something that we talked about growing up, right? Particularly if you didn't have a lot of resources growing up, right? Or money, right? Because some self-care stuff does require money. And so now being in a position where I can do that, I'm trying to be very intentional to get, in terms of the plan, right? Making sure that, whether it's a massage, whether it's a bath, it doesn't have to cost money, but all these different things that we can do because it's going to be so important. I worry about compassion exhaustion that we're going to have, right? Especially being new grads and seeing all these patients that, we're just going to want to help everybody and kind of overdo it. So I think it's really important that we're having these conversations now and these thoughts. So that way we don't get like that, right? Where we're seeing all these patients and we want to help everybody because we want to be part of the solution to reduce the stigma, right, of mental health, and then forget to take care of ourselves, right? And then, kind of have to make sure that we think, okay, I need to be good in order for me to be good for my patients, right? And so I think that's really important for us to now start talking about it. So once we do get out there, we are prioritizing our self-care.
I super agree. I definitely think that before even starting this program, I definitely kind of had an idea of what a therapist was, and it was a person that doesn't have any mental health issues. That's why they're able to help others. But I think the more I'm learning, the more it's destigmatizing that, I guess, that messaging I got as a kid, where that mental health is mental health is a bad thing, or that getting help for mental health is a bad thing. So I think the more I learn and the more aware I become of it, I realize that I'm more willing to accept that basically we're all human and we all go through struggles and we all need help. So I definitely think for me, once I start seeing clients, that I will prioritize self-help, just because I do know that that's going to be the best thing for the patient and for myself. So I think for me, what I plan to do for self care is more one, seeing a therapist as well to make sure that I can get out all those feelings, especially how we mentioned, the emotional aspect of just the emotional exhaustion that it probably is going to take. And also just also I think just having that prioritization of releasing it and not taking it home with you as well. I think
Yeah.
that's another thing I
Yeah.
want to make sure not to do, not take it home.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I basically agreed with everything all you guys said.
This is a good discussion. I'm glad that we were able to meet and have this, because I think it's good for us to even have each other, right? That could be part of the self-care, right? We have our own groups and we're venting or I'm so stressed about this assignment, and then helping each other.
Honestly, it helps a lot having
Yeah.
other people go through it with you. You're not alone.
Yeah.
Exactly.